So since we actually did the intervals, we wrote the class for the interval. Let's actually try to use that interval class. So another question is if there are intervals. So let's say the intervals is 1 comma 3, or let's say 1 comma 5, and there's another interval called 3 comma 7. There's another interval called uh, 2 comma 4, and there is another interval called 8 comma 15. So these are the intervals which are there. What I want to do is I actually want to merge all these intervals. So in that case we'll actually have and return the intervals which is there. So the intervals that is there is 1 comma 5, 3 comma 7, 2 comma 4. 2 comma 4 actually lies exactly between this, and 1 and 5 and 3 and 7 actually merge. So when we actually merge all of this should become 1 comma 7 and 8 comma 15. So that is basically what we want to do, right? So we'll write the code, and we'll actually take use of the intervals for this one, right? So what we will do over here is we'll write a function which will merge all these intervals. So we'll say private static, let's say void for now, and we'll say merge intervals, and we'll pass an array list of intervals. And we'll call this intervals. Okay, so how can we actually implement this? So let's say these so the first thing that we want to do is we actually want to sort this intervals. So we want to actually sort these intervals based on the starting time. So based on the starting time, if we sort this intervals, this will actually become 1 comma 5 and 2 comma 4 and 3 comma 7 and then 8 comma 15, right? So then what we'll do is we'll create a stack of these intervals. We'll insert the first one, which is 1 comma 5. Then we'll bring the next one. We'll bring the next one, and we'll check if 2 comma 4 is squarely between 1 comma 5. It is squarely between 1 comma 5. We won't do anything. We'll just discard this. Next, what we want to do is if 3 comma 7, they overlap, but this is not squarely inside it. In that case, I'll pop out 1 comma 5 from here. So I will pop out 1 comma 5 from here, and then I will merge the 1 comma 5 and 3 comma 7. So my start of this will be 1 and end will be 7, and then I'll put that back in. So it will be 1 comma 7. Next is 8 comma 5. 8 comma 5 does not intersect, so then I'll just push it in there. So 8 comma 15 is there. So that is so in the end, if we are done with all these intervals, we actually have a stack. Then we start popping it out. So it'll be 8 comma 15 and 1 comma 7. So these are the two intervals after merging them. So that is basically how we write this. So first thing we need to figure out is how to sort these intervals. So for sorting the intervals, so we'll say intervals, and we'll sort these intervals based on the start time. So we'll say intervals dot sort, and if we look at this, it says that I want a comparator inside it, right? So we'll say we'll add a new comparator, and we'll click on this, and this actually brings the comparator. So there's an interval which I am passing over here, and let's say the interval first one is x and the second one is y. So we are passing the two intervals. So what this is doing is if it returns 0, then that means that both of them are same. If it returns 1, then that means the x is actually bigger. If it returns y, then that means y is bigger, right? So by default, it is basically saying that both of them are equal. So that is what we are doing. So we'll start over here, and we'll say x dot start is greater than y dot start. So in that case, we return 1 because x is actually bigger. Else, if x dot start is smaller than y dot start, in that case we'll return -1, right? Otherwise we return 0. So that is basically the comparator which is there, right? So we actually have the comparator which is there, and that is basically doing the entire comparison of this. So basically we actually have a custom comparator for these intervals, and now we actually have sorted our list based on based on the starting point of the intervals. So now we have sorted it out. At that point of time, we actually need to take a stack. So we'll take a stack of intervals. We'll call it stack is equal to new stack of intervals. Okay, so we have a stack of intervals. Okay, so next what we want to do is we want to push the first one. So we'll stack dot push, and we'll push the intervals dot get at the value 0. So the first one. Okay, then what we want to do is we'll say for integer I is equal to 0, I is less than intervals dot size, and I plus plus. Okay, so we'll say interval top is equal to stack dot peak, so we get the top one. So when we do a peak, we get the top one, and then we'll check if top dot end is less than intervals dot get at I dot start, right? So if that is the case, then what we will do is basically at that point of time, both of them are actually not matching. So the top one is here, and the next one is basically the start is so there's no intersection between them. So in that case, we will actually just push the value. So we'll say stack dot push, and we are pushing intervals dot get at the location I. So we do that. Okay, otherwise what we'll do is else if, so we will check if the intervals actually are basically overlapping. So if they are overlapping, so we'll say top dot end, if top dot end is less than intervals dot get at location I dot end. So in this case, they are overlapping. So if they are overlapping, in that case, what we'll say is top dot end will be equal to intervals dot get at location I dot end. So we'll update the top dot end interval, and then we'll say stack dot pop, and then we'll say stack dot push, and we'll put the top in there, right? So we have merged these two intervals and we have popped it. Otherwise, the third case is that if they don't, if the new one is basically squarely inside the first one, we won't do anything. And in the end, we'll say while stack dot size is greater than 0, while stack dot size is greater than 0, we'll say interval say value is equal to stack dot pop, and then we'll say so we'll take plus, so this is the interval, and plus we'll put a comma, plus value dot end, and then we'll actually say plus this. Okay, so we print that out, and yeah, so I think that should print all our intervals. So let's actually test it out, and we'll say interval actually array list of interval, call array list is equal to new array list. Okay, so this is an array list, and then we'll say interval array list dot insert dot add and new interval, and the interval that we will be adding is 1 comma 5, So we'll actually add 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 intervals. And 1 comma 5, and this was 3 comma 7, and this was 2 comma 4, and this was 8 comma 15. And then we actually will say what is the name of the function is merge intervals. Okay, so we will run this and see. It should give us two values, 8 and 15, and 1 and 7. So that is correct. Okay.